Hey, hello everyone, welcome to another video tutorial, and today we're going to cover the topic political and legal environment. It's not one of my favorites, but it's important to know it and we're going to discover why. So I prepared a list of topics as you can see here in your slide, like the home country environment, host country environment, the international environment, and also the ethical issues that, we might face during the political and legal environment research. So let's go. You know what they say that every time that you talk about politics or laws, it usually ends up in chaos. But I hope this is not the case because we're going to cover this topic as the professional marketers that we are. So, we're going to cover the differences and we're going to see how important it is to know about politics in the international field so that we can reach a really good marketing strategy. So, much as most managers would like to ignore them, political and legal factors often play a critical role in international marketing activities. The interpretation and application of regulations can sometimes lead to conflicting and even misleading results. Of course, a single international political and legal environment does not exist. There are several of them, but the business executive must be aware of political and legal factors on a variety of levels. So the study of international political and legal environment must therefore be broken down into several subsegments. Many researchers do this by separating the legal from the political. This separation, although perhaps analytically useful, is somewhat artificial because laws are generally the result of political decisions. But now let's learn a little bit more. In making decisions about his or her firm's international marketing activities, the manager will need to concentrate on three areas. The main ones are the political and legal circumstances of the home country, those of the host country, and the bilateral and multilateral agreements, treaties, and laws governing the relations between host and home countries, as you can see here in these three circles. So first, we're going to start talking about home country. And what is it? As you might imagine, yes, we're going to talk about the country that is home of the company that we want to manage. And that leads me to the next. No manager can afford to ignore the policies and regulations of the country from which he or she, because we are inclusive, conducts international marketing transactions. So, hear me out, this is really important. Wherever a firm is located, it will be affected by government policies and the legal system. I know, it doesn't sound really good, but it is important and it is really necessary to behave and to have a really good political system. So, often, governments also have specific rules and regulations restricting international marketing. Such regulations are frequently political in nature and are based on the fact that governments believe commerce to be only one objective among others, such as foreign policy and national security. Four main areas of governmental activities are for major concern to the international marketer here. So we have embargoes or trade sanctions, export controls, import controls, and the regulation of international business behavior. I'm pretty sure that you've heard about embargoes and sanctions before because we've seen it in movies or even we've heard about something that happened even here in Mexico. So you as students of international trade must be really aware that this is something that happens, and as marketers, it happens too, and you must be aware and you must anticipate these kind of situations in the political environment. So what is it? The terms trade sanctions and embargoes as used here refer to governmental actions that distort the free flow of trading goods, services, or ideas. Most of the times it is for decidedly adversarial and political rather than strictly economic purposes. And as I told you before, frequently, firms try to anticipate sanctions based on their evaluations of the international political climate. Okay, so you're going to realize that in this specific environment, controls are really important. we need to have a law, we need to have a regulation, we need to have an agreement or something that is based on paper so that we can take it as a reference. And in this case, we're going to see the export controls. Many nations have export control systems, even Mexico, I think, which are designed to deny or at least delay the acquisition of strategically important goods by adversaries. So the legal basis for export controls varies across nations, but I'm going to share like the basic control determinants and the steps in the decision process that are summarized in the picture that you have here. So, after an export license application has been filed, the government specialists match the commodity to be exported with the Commerce Control List, a file containing information about products that are either particularly sensitive to national security or controlled for other purposes. The product is then matched with the country of destination and the recipient company, and if no concerns regarding any of the three exist, an export license is issued. Today's international environment continues to highlight the importance of export controls. Restricting the flow of materials can be crucial in avoiding the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Also, reducing flows of technological knowledge can reduce the sophistication of armaments used by insurgent groups. Financial controls can inhibit funding for terrorist training. On the other hand, we have the import controls. As I told you, there are many nations that have export controls, but also many nations have import controls. So in these countries, either all imports or the imports of particular products are controlled through tariff and non-tariff mechanisms. I'm pretty sure that you know what I'm talking about because, you study international trade. And you can see them here in the circles. So tariffs place a tax on imports and raise prices. And you know that, right? And non-tariff barriers like voluntary restraint agreements are self-imposed restrictions and cutbacks aimed at avoiding punitive trade actions from the host. Quota systems reduce the volume of imports accepted by a country. The final effect of all these actions is a quantitative reduction of imports. For the international marketer, like you, such restrictions may mean that the most efficient sources of supply are not available because government regulations restrict importation from those sources. The result is either second-best products or higher costs for restricted supplies. Finally, we have regulation of international business behavior. Home countries may implement special laws and regulations to ensure that international business behavior of their firms is conducted within the legal, moral, and ethical boundaries considered appropriate. Several major areas in which nations attempt to govern the international marketing activities of its firms are boycotts, whereby firms refuse to do business with someone and often for political reasons. Antitrust measures wherein firms are seen as restricting competition, so they are not letting others to compete in the same market, and corruption, which occurs when firms obtain contracts with bribes rather than through performance. So they are receiving money so that they get the contract. Okay, so now we have the host country political and legal environment. The host country is this country that is really friendly, who tells you, you have a business? Okay, so no problem, you can do it in my country, right? That is a host country. The host country environment, both political and legal, affects the international marketing operations of firms in a variety of ways. A good manager, like you guys, will understand the country in which the firm operates so that he or she is able to work within the existing parameters that can anticipate and plan for changes that may occur. As you can see it in your slide, we're going to cover two main topics: the political action and risk, and the legal differences and restraints. I know, it is so weird to find political and risk in the same sentence. You feel kind of like a really bad vibe, right? But don't worry, we're going to see what it is. Firms usually prefer to conduct business in a country with a stable and friendly government, but such governments are not always easy to find. as you can imagine, right? There is political risk in every nation, but the range of risks varies widely from country to country. It's not the same to talk about risk in Mexico than to talk about risk in Germany or India or any country that you can think of. So, political risk is defined as the risk of loss when investing in a given country caused by changes in a country's political structure or policies, such as tax laws, tariffs, expropriation of assets, or restriction in repatriation of profits. Three major types of political risk can be encountered. We have the ownership risk, which exposes property and life. We have the operating risk, which refers to interference with the ongoing operations of a firm, and transfer risk, which is mainly encountered when attempts are made to shift funds between countries. Now we're going to talk about changes in policy that take a strong nationalist and anti-foreign investment stance. It's really common. The most drastic steps resulting from such policy changes are usually confiscation and expropriation. An important governmental action is expropriation, which is the seizure of foreign assets by a government with payment of compensation to the owners. So basically the government is going to pay to the foreign investors and they give them a compensation for the company that they have. The use of expropriation as a policy tool has sharply decreased over time. It's not so common nowadays. Apparently, governments have come to recognize that the damage inflicted on themselves through expropriation exceeds the benefits. Now, confiscation is similar to expropriation in that it results in a transfer of ownership from the foreign firm to the host country. However, its effects are even harder or even harsher in that it does not involve compensation for the firm. So it's basically the government saying, okay, so we like your company, we're going to take it, thank you so much. Are you going to receive any money? No. Are you going to receive a thank you? Maybe. That's basically confiscation. And domestication is the same, to gain control over foreign investment, but the method is kind of different. Through domestication, the government demands partial transfer of ownership and management responsibility and imposes regulations to ensure that a large share of the product is locally produced and a larger share of the profit is retained in the country. So in my personal opinion, I think this is the best one because it's basically the government saying, okay, your company is really good. It's from another country, we know, but we're going to give you the opportunity just if you give us the opportunity to have a better job and to have a better income. So if you agree with that, we're going to give you the chance. I know this might be a little bit overwhelming because, we're talking about the world. We have different countries, different cultures, different ways of thinking, but I know you can do it. So right now we're going to focus on the legal differences and restraints. Countries differ in their laws as well as in their implementation of these laws. And you can see it right now in the COVID situation. So countries are putting out laws to protect the society, but in different ways. So for example, in China, they said that a lockdown was mandatory and they had to do it for at least 1 month. In Spain, they are putting fees for anyone who is out on the streets. And in Mexico, for example, the implementation of new laws for the COVID situation, it's just different. So that is a good example of it. So over the millennia of civilization, many different laws and legal systems have emerged. We have, again, different regulations. A key legal perspective that survives today is that of theocracy, which has faith and belief as its key focus and is a mix of societal, legal, and spiritual guidelines. While these legal systems are important to society locally, from an international business perspective, the two major legal systems worldwide can be categorized into common law and code law. So maybe you're wondering, what is it? Common law is based on tradition and depends less on written rules and codes than on precedent and custom. Common law originated in England and is the system of law found today in the United States. On the other hand, code law is based on a comprehensive set of written rules. Countries with code law try to spell out all possible legal rules explicitly. Code law is based on Roman law and is found in the majority of nations of the world. In general, countries with the code law system have much more rigid laws than those with the common law system. Now we have the international environment, and it's basically the conjunction or the union of the home country and the host country policies. So in addition to the politics and laws of both the home and the host countries, again, the international marketer must consider the overall international political and legal environment. Relations between countries can have a profound impact on firms trying to do business internationally. Of course, international law plays an important role in the conduct of international business. Although no enforceable body of international law exists, certain treaties and agreements respected by a number of countries profoundly influence international business operations. As an example, the World Trade Organization, that defines internationally acceptable economic practices for its member nations. Although it does not deal directly with individual firms, it does influence them indirectly by providing a more stable and predictable international market environment. Finally, we get to the international terrorism on marketing. And terrorism is the systematic use or threat of violence aimed at attaining a political goal and conveying a political message. So every time you see a terrorist attack is because they want to send a political message, most of the times. International terrorism seeks to do this across national borders. Terrorists direct their strikes at business far more than any other target. So the objective, again, is to do harm to businesses. Businesses need to be easily accessible and able to conduct transactions with many new persons every day. This introduces a level of vulnerability which is not typically encountered by government offices. One key side effect of terrorism can be the government policies and laws it brings about. In order to make a country less vulnerable, politicians often enact restrictions on the business environment. New regulations in customs clearance may delay the supply of inputs, increase the administrative burden, and require firms to invest in new procedures. Transaction costs generally increase, and the commercial environment may be altered in ways that are more harmful to business than the terrorist attack itself might have been. So basically, we have to take into consideration is not so common, but it's something that we as marketers should have in mind, because when it happens, you should see again the key side effect and all the political environment that it brings, and just to be prepared and to have it in mind, to have a strategy in case that happens is really helpful every time. Finally, we have the ethical issues. Corporate governance, responsibility, intellectual property rights, and corruption all fall under the ethical obligations experienced by multinational enterprises today, and we're going to learn a little bit more about every single one of them. In this case, the relationships among stakeholders that determine and control the strategic direction and performance of an organization are called corporate governance. It's basically the team, all right? The team that is going to take decisions and the team that is going to decide where the company is going to go and where do you want it to be, and the one that creates agreements. So a system of corporate governance must be established to ensure that decisions are made and interests are represented properly for all stakeholders. They all have to be in this agreement. They all have to have a good benefit. So the structured conduct and methods used in the assessment of company behavior vary dramatically across countries. But we have some key elements of corporate governance that remain. Okay, so the transparency of a firm's operations, its financial results, and the principles by which it measures sales, expenses, assets, and liabilities. They all stay the same. That is the importance of accounting. You had accounting in the last terms, and you learned that they have also regulations so that when you see it, it doesn't matter where is it from, you can understand it and you can really analyze where all of the information come from. So it's easier for everybody, and for us as marketers, it's easy as well. Okay guys, we're almost done. Hold on a little bit more, all right? We have the intellectual property, and I'm pretty sure that you've heard about this before. It's taking off in Mexico, so we can take advantage of it. And the development of a new product or technique by a corporation can be a lucrative endeavor, opening the door to a variety of benefits, such as a larger customer base, increased market share, or a reduction in production costs. The term intellectual property refers to a legal entitlement, a legal document of exclusive rights to use an idea, a piece of knowledge, or an invention. Okay, so the subject of such legal claims must be a product of the mind, an intangible but potentially profitable form of property. So from that intangible, you can create a product and you can receive a benefit from it. Bribery and corruption. But first, let me tell you that you made it till the very end of the video. So without further ado, let's start. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that you've heard about this before, because corruption is just a major issue here in the country, in Mexico. And maybe at the end, you can change your perspective, not just as an individual, but also as a professional, as a marketer, okay? In many countries, payments or favors are a way of life, and a greasing of the wheels is expected in return for government services. So again, it's really common that you give money or that you give a favor to someone, and in return, that person that usually works in the government gives you a permission or a document or something that you need in order for your business to keep on the road. Okay? A major issue that is critical for international marketers is that of general standards of behavior and ethics. You have to understand how to behave and how are the ethics of the country that you are researching. Increasingly, public concerns are raised about such issues as global warming, pollution, and moral behavior. Those are the basics. However, these issues are not of the same importance in every country. What may be frowned or even illegal in one nation may be customary or at least acceptable in others. For example, cutting down the Brazilian rainforest may be acceptable for the government. Brazil is okay with that, but scientists, concerned customers, and environmentalists may object really hard because of the effect of global warming and other climatic changes. So again, it's important that you understand that maybe it is legal, maybe it is okay with government, but for your image in front of the customer's eyes, it's not a really good idea. So that's the importance of understanding the issue of bribery and corruption, because it's never okay. Even if it's legal or even if you can get to an agreement with the government, you should avoid doing this because of your moral and because you're a professional marketer. And it's always a good idea to see your perspective and the stage in the country that you're trying to investigate, because that gives you an idea, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it. That is how we get to the end of another video tutorial. Thank you so much for being here. Now you know the basics of the legal and political environment, and it's time to put it into practice. So see you next time.